Hello and welcome to all of our listeners. It's Rowing Chat time again this month. I'm Rebecca Carrow, your host, and today I'm joined by Mike Davenport. Hello, Mike. Who are you and what do you do?
I am, a rowing coach and a administrator for athletic department in a college in Washington, or Maryland. Washington College is the name, in Maryland, the US of A. And I try to help people navigate their way through the world of rowing and rigging and coaching. And that's what I do.
I'm intrigued. What on earth drew you to rigging?
You know, that's, I was thinking about that when you asked me to do this. And I've been into sports since, I think, 74. And my first couple years, first 4 or 5 years as a rower. And I became intrigued. I've always liked mechanical things. I became intrigued with the mechanics of a rowing shell. And then when I started to coach after my college time was done, I started to realize that so many people were really mystified by the rowing equipment. They struggled with what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And those were things that I enjoyed and felt a little bit comfortable with. So I just started to kind of share a little knowledge here or there. I mean, things that I've gained from other people. And it just kind of caught on, and then I realized more and more people could use it. So I just started sharing the information, and a book came about, then a website, then asked to go around and travel here or there, then became involved with the U.S. team as their boatman, and did a lot of things with the rowing equipment there. So it's a strange existence. Just all kind of, it's like a snowball at the top of the hill. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's how it all came about.
You're clearly filling a void because before I met you and found out about your book and your website, I certainly had never met anyone who seemed to have the depth of knowledge that you have, apart from the odd coach who said, "Oh, I think your pitch is out." So congratulations for finding a niche and occupying it so confidently.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's been fun. There's a lot of really interesting characters, not only in the sport of rowing, but those that focus on rowing equipment. And it's been my pleasure to get to know some of them over the years.
I hope you'll be telling us some anecdotes about them later on.
There's a lot of them, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure we could find one or two, make it a little interesting. Yeah.
Our first question is really deliberately phrased because of the confusion that some people feel around rigging. So what is the first thing you teach about rigging to beginner athletes?
You know, I think there's two concepts that kind of cut through the whole, everything I profess about rigging and everything I try to reinforce to people about it. Or we'll take it past just rigging. Rigging in my mind is or my vocabulary actually, is the adjustment of the equipment, but looking more at the equipment totally. We're one of the most equipment intensive sports. So when people just become into rowing, when they just become acquainted with it and start doing it, the number one thing I try to teach them is just a love for the equipment. Now, love may sound a little bit kumbaya-ish, a little bit, like, oh, here's a hippie. And it is, but love goes in this aspect, especially from respect. If a rower without equipment is nothing but a swimmer. So
I'm changing sport.
Yeah, there you go. It's cheaper. Swimming's a whole lot cheaper. Yeah. I try to, and the coaches I work with, which is a great group of folks, we try just to instill, most importantly, a respect for the equipment. We don't let our college rowers be involved in the adjustment as such. The coxswains will help tighten up things, and the rowers certainly take equipment apart and put it back together. But in terms of the specific adjustments, the rigging, if you will, maybe the pure sense of the word rigging, we the coaches do that, mainly because there's not a whole lot of things we can control on race day, and it's just darn right nice to have control of something. So we, wander around the race course with a hammer and a couple tools, and everybody tends to leave you alone. You feel like you're doing something. You're really not, but you're doing something. So that's the first thing, is just a love for the equipment, a respect. And then the second thing is that we try to instill is if it doesn't feel right, tell us. And I'm talking about, when somebody who's just begun rowing, they won't know if it feels heavy or light, but we're talking about, does it feel uncomfortable? Is there pain associated with the stroke? Are you coming up with massive blisters? Is there something digging into your foot? I mean, those type of things. Start looking at your equipment from the standpoint of, it's not functioning, doesn't feel right. So those two things are for the new people, kind of the introductory people, or as you said, the beginner athletes.
Fantastic. I certainly remember one of my earliest coaches had a very firm rule that when you were taking the boat in and out of the boathouse, you were not allowed to talk unless you were the coxswain. And certainly now as an adult and now as a master's rower, I see so many knocks and dings happen because people are not 100% focused on the job in hand.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the side, if you just took a moment and look at any boathouse bay frame, with the doors on, there's a lot of stories there. There's a lot of nicks and dings and dents, and each one has their own story. It'd be really interesting to hear some of those stories. Unfortunately, at your boathouse, you get to witness some of them, and they're not all that pleasant.
That's true. Most of them are just carelessness, and every repair adds weight to your boat.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And also reduces your budget accordingly too. So
this is true.
Yeah.
So moving forward, we've had a question in from Liz who says, does moving the foot stretcher forward to get a longer stroke make the boat go faster? She says, I can see it adjusts the hip to the less optimal position of off-centre to the pin. So is this worth the added workload for the rower, considering the power of the stroke is weakest at the catch?
Liz, you ask a real good question, and I'm going to give you on face value, which is an absolute rotten answer, in that maybe it could. And that's, I think, an important theme that I'll carry through with a lot of these questions. I mean, there's some good questions out here. And these are, I would say I probably get one or two questions a week from people that are struggling with some of these aspects. And Liz, your question is one that I get quite common. And what I say is, it all comes down to testing. Whenever you start making these adjustments, you need to test it. And I'll go back to a simple little model of, you just bought a brand new car. If you've ever been so lucky to purchase a new car, you get in, it smells, different. You got all these buttons to press and things. But what you want to first do is move your seat around. And for me to say, Liz, this is what you need to do with your seat. You need to move it in this position, and you need to have this. You need to torque your back, so the back part of the seat, so it lays back to this angle. Without really knowing how you drive, it would be worthless information. It would be terrible feedback. So it comes with testing. So you get in your car and you move your seat, and that feels good. Or if it doesn't feel good, you move it somewhere else and you keep moving it. I mean, I really think whoever invented the little buttons on the side where you can move your seat if you have these electric seats. Not that I do. I mean, it's a higher level of car than I'm driving, but I've rented one or something where you can push a button and it comes to a certain setting, and then say your wife or your spouse or somebody else gets in the car on the trip you're on and they adjust their seat, and then they can memorize that. So you can go back and forth by a simple push of the button. I'd like to have lunch with the person that came up with that, because that's a pretty neat idea. I wish we could do the same in rowing. There's too many adjustments for that. So to get back to Liz's question, I think, Liz, it comes down to testing. You need to try it. Not a lot of rowers want to hear that. What they want to hear is, give me the numbers, I'm going to do it, and that's that. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It's not that's that. So moving your foot stretcher forward, in this case, I'm assuming you mean towards the stern, could make your boat go faster. At the same time, it could make your boat go slower, or it may have no difference at all. And that's one of the things where you need just to make gradual adjustments and try it and test it. And don't be afraid of the results. And if the result comes back, and how you measure the results, that's something we can talk about later on. But don't be afraid of the results being either positive or negative. You know, if I remember a friend of mine who I'm sure that the name will resonate with all the Kiwis who are listening is Harry Mann. Harry was a wonderful guy, and I remember one time he was working with the New Zealand team, and I was working with the U.S. team, and I asked him a question. He said, "Yeah, you should do this," and I tried it, and it didn't work, and I felt really bad. And I went back to him and said, "Harry, that didn't work." He said, "Yeah, I didn't think it would, but you know, it's good you tried it." Harry, you know, you have to test. And if you really are interested in pursuing speed, which it sounds like you are here, Liz, being a little bit faster or a little bit more comfortable, then you just need to test. And I think that's what it comes down to.
I certainly was always told when one's adjusting rig to only ever adjust one thing at a time.
Yes, and I think the first thing you need to adjust is your brain. To get, that's the first adjustment that needs to be made. I see that happen in, American boathouses, but I would bet it's typical across the world. People get in there with this mindset, okay, I'm going to adjust this, and this is going to work because that person told me it's going to work. I read it in this book, or I measured it off of somebody's boat, and he's fast or she's fast, so this must work. And I don't think enough people are willing to experiment, or willing to really throw things out there and use their own opinions as validity for the change, either good or for bad.
That's a really, really great statement. And it brings us back to some commonly held misbeliefs about rig, which is that I'm regularly told that there are some reasonably standard setups for different boats and different types of athletes. And in fact, I saw these verified when FISA did a rigging survey at the World Rowing Championships when they were in Dorney Lake in 2005, which if anyone wants them, I can share a link afterwards. And it was quite interesting that given the number of countries participating across the whole regatta, there was a very clear consistency of similarity in spans and oar lengths and inboards. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and it's interesting. For years, Hart Perry, who's kind of one of the fixtures in U.S. rowing for many, many years, he and the I'm not sure if he was. I think he was working with FISA as he did this, although Hart did not work for FISA. He would at the World Championships. He would get all these measurements. So there was a great this culmination of the spreads, the oar lengths, and such. And it was a nice resource to have, but it was a very dangerous resource to have. And I'll go back to that in 1 second. So what Harry would do is he would take all this information and they would publish it. So each year after the World Championships, you would see all this information. And there were variations on themes. However, they were slight variations. A little bit of spread difference, a little bit of oar length difference. And the reason I go back to the point of it was a very dangerous piece of information because I noticed that rowers, coaches, more than rowers, but coaches would take this information for this group of exceptional athletes, the elite level athletes of the world, and they would take it, and we would see high school rowing coaches here in the States applying that same rigging numbers, those same measurements and dimensions to their high school women's novice eights who may be 10th graders, and totally wrong adjustments for them. So there are at that level for those 10th graders, there would be numbers that are probably pretty similar to everyone else who's of that grouping. However, that grouping of 10th graders will have greatly different numbers than that, the grand poobahs of rowing, if you will, the elite level rowers. So I agree with your statement partly in that there are not a whole lot of variations, but that depends on the level. So that's my long way of saying kind of, sort of, Rebecca.
I'm going to enjoy your variations on this maybe theme.
Yeah.
Our next question is about measuring. What's an easy way to measure the catch and the finish angle?
Well, that's a good one. And I have gone around and professed this, that in the world of rowing, there's not a whole lot of place for, well, there's a place, but there isn't a whole lot of controversy in the world of rowing. One of the few places that I've noticed controversy is about this measurement that you're talking about right now. And it's interesting. You'll have some coaches will weigh in on the side of, well, everything's about the catch angle. And then some people will weigh in, other coaches will weigh in. It's all about the finish angle or the finish length and catch length. It's kind of like here in the States, Coke versus Pepsi, or Apple versus PC. And I see these almost rabid fans of both, and they tend not to listen to the other side, and that's okay. So I have to kind of weave my way through this with, I used to weave my way through this, let me say, without trying to step on either's foot of the finish length people, or the catch length people, or the angle. And I came in to do that. This is I used to really profess this thing called work through, on measurement of work through, which is the distance, if you were to take a perpendicular from the oarlock, an imaginary line that would go right across the gunnels of the boat at 90 degrees. From there, that distance from there to the front stops, that's how I used to try to weave my way through the catch angle and the finish angle controversy.
Yeah, we used to call it the work through the pin. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I've stopped being so nice, and I've stopped, I guess part of getting older is it's almost fun to annoy people. So with the understanding that I'm probably going to annoy half of your audience, I'm going to say this, that it depends on what part of the stroke that you want to emphasize on how you should measure it. For example, if you have a crew that's very catch oriented and you want to focus on the catch as the high point of the stroke, and that's where you're really putting all the money, so to speak, then you should measure catch angle. And a simple way to do that is either work length or catch length. Work through the pin or catch length, or a catch angle. And I'll tell you 2 seconds how to measure that. Or if you're a finish type of person, where you really favor the finish and say, this is where it's all about getting everybody together at the finish and, rah, rah, go team, then you measure the finish length. Personally, I weigh in on the catch length. And somebody called me out. I do a lot of clinics, and somebody called me out and said, why? And, I was scratching my head trying to, here I am on stage, 40, 50 people, and the person said, yeah, okay, so why, Mr. Smarty, why do you do that? And the only thing I could come up with was because that's the way I was taught, and now that's the way I coach that catch, and I use the catch length, which is kind of a cop-out. So to get specifically to your point, if I have a crew or myself as the person adjusting, and we have a lot of people who adjust rowing equipment that they may not know it, and they're just going how to all the concepts, so they're just doing the mechanics. We'll have a lot in the States, we'll have a lot of well-meaning parents that are just helping out with the team, and they never rowed before, but their daughter or their son's rowing, so they wander down the boathouse, and next thing you know, they're given a couple wrenches and a tape measure, and here's, shoot off to a boat that's guts up, and they have to make these adjustments. And I think in a case like that, you do measure the work length, or the work through the pin, if you will. That's perfectly fine and dandy way to do it. If you're more knowledgeable about how to do it, you measure the catch length, which is that using that same perpendicular through the pin, and then you measure sternward away from that, put 2 pieces of tape on the gunnel, and then you can, as the rower rows, you just see if that's where the end of the oar handle touches at the catch. You can back that up and go through the finish length if you're of the other mind to that other set, if you like the PC rather than Apple.
So I like that. So just a light-coloured piece of tape on the gunnel and easy to see. I like it.
Mm-hmm. And then you ride along in your launch, and you can see, if you're not in the launch, you can do it from the dock, but as they row, then you can see if they are, if the end of the oar handle is still coming to that tape, imagine a plane across those 2 pieces of tape. I find where that is really helpful is when you increase the rating. So many crews will, as the rating increases, shorten their stroke in an attempt to get the rating up, especially in sprints. And if you have the tape there and you're going along with your crew and riding along, or you're videoing, you can see if they're shortening up. Mm-hmm. I think that's an advantage of using the catch length over the work, the finish length. Yeah.
We occasionally taped little drinking straws to the desired catch point, so that the rower's knuckles graze across a drinking straw, so that they know if they're shortening up and they stop touching the straw.
Sure, and they can then just take it out and drink it out of the water bottle with it.
Sometimes I wish some of them would.
Yeah.
So, moving on from catch angles, the next question is about foot stretcher angles. Would you set the foot stretcher angle differently for a sweep versus a sculling boat?
Here's what I would do. I think that's a very personal question. And what I mean by that is that's one of those measurements that depends on the individual in that seat. I don't think it depends on the size of boat or the category, whether it's sweep or sculling. I think it depends on the individual. One of the main criteria there would be ankle flexibility. How comfortable is that person at the catch? The normal foot stretcher angle, or rake, if you will, is about 45 degrees, give or take. And that I'm not sure if all manufacturers ship them now with that as standard, but they used to, or at least a lot of them did. But most boats, not all, but most boats right now come with it. It is adjustable, so you can easily adjust them. And I would say it depends on the individual whether they need more or less on that. Our men's coach right now is doing some testing with some Shimano foot stretchers where the angle is greatly adjustable, almost individually adjustable. We do some testing here and stuff, so that's very interesting. So I would say it depends on the individual. Bob and Jack, who are rowing in the same boat, may be greatly uncomfortable, one of them, with this having the same rake, that same angle, so they can adjust it a little bit and get a little bit more comfortable.
Moving on then from that, how do you know that your feet are at the correct height on the foot stretcher for an individual's body or leg length?
Well, I think if your feet are the correct height, it's usually, there are set measurements. If you were to put a piece of, let's say, a straight edge across the gunnel and measure down from that to the bottom of the heel cup, mm-hmm. and then put that straight edge again over the top of the seat, measure down and subtract those two differences, you'll get about 17 or 19 centimeters usually. But I think the greatest motivator to move that height up and down is the leg length of the individual athlete. We're not all created differently, but there are differences. And we'll have, and I noticed with my team I coach, that, if we have 3 gals, 4 gals, 5 gals that are exactly at 5'10", it doesn't mean that their leg lengths are exactly the same at all. So sometimes we'll move the feet down or up according to their leg length and how their position is at the catch. So what I mean by that is, how comfortable are they at the catch? And somebody with long legs, with say a standard, let's call it 18 centimeter heel cup height difference, may not even be able to get the full body angle forward because her knees or his knees are so far up, so high up, almost knee into the chin. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if you drop that down or give them a little bit of a seat pad so that you raise their hips up a little bit, you can greatly impact their comfort and also their efficiency. So I would say this I think you're seeing a theme here, Rebecca. You asked me a question. I don't give you a exactly straight answer. I kind of come around at a little bit because there are a little bit of variations and theories on each of these. But I think if you're looking at an athlete in a boat and you want to see if their feet are at the right height, see if you can get the proper shin angle, which is, we'll just call it 90 degrees right now. So when they're at the catch, shin is usually 90 degrees to the water. Maybe it's a little bit less if the upper body angle that you want. If you can't get that, one of the options may be to either drop the feet or give them a seat pad, and not just a comfortable seat pad, but one with a little bit of heft to raise them up.
Great. So we have a question from Rob, who says, how do you set a catch angle and finish angle appropriate for a collegiate with good/adequate skill levels?
Rob, I'm going to put you on the same list as Liz, and you probably are both going to send me a nastygram here, but I'm going to come back and just say you have to test. If you're coaching college in the States and you have a competitive crew, I think that's a testimony that you're a solid coach and you probably have a good background knowledge of some of the basics here. So I would think it would be very reasonable now, Rob, to say it's time to test and make slow changes. So, for example, let's say your catch length, which is measured by, again, going through the perpendicular through the pin. I'm waving my hands like you can see, sorry. Perpendicular through the pin to a distance, and let's say for college men's 8, maybe it's 90 centimeters towards the stern. That is probably where they are now. Go test, and here's how you test. You can use a speed coach, which is great. You can use a Coxmate, which is super great. You can use how fast it takes them to go from the rock that looks like a bear to the bear that looks like a rock, and time that. You test accordingly to what works for you, and then make a slight adjustment and test again. We do a lot of testing here internally of our own numbers, and sometimes it takes 1, 2, or 3 practices to test. And we're not number crazy. We get comfortable and we leave our numbers, and that's good. But we also want to know things. So we tested some new oars last year, and we get down to the end of the season. I wanted to see what's faster, what's not, and we spend and I've got a video up on my site. And we spent quite a bit of time testing, maybe 2 days of testing. And the numbers were great to have. And it also let me sleep a little better at night, so I wasn't worried about those numbers. So I would say, Rob, measure where you exactly are now, and then plan out how you're going to adjust. Make a slight adjustment, maybe a centimeter longer or a centimeter shorter, and then test. And then if you feel like you need to, make another adjustment and then test. But always have that initial measurement so you can come back to it.
Recording your initial measurements. I've got so many soggy pieces of paper that I find in the bottom of my jacket pockets and in the bottom of my toolbox, and you look at it and you go, what was that recording? I can see a few numbers there. So,
here, one sec, Rebecca. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. But when you said about tools, I think specifically what we were both joking a little bit about the soggy pieces of paper. One of the tools that I use that I absolutely love, and I get no kickback for saying this, though, is I use a program online called Evernote, where I just put those numbers in, and not only can I see them myself a year from now or 3 years from now, but it's easy to share that with my other coaches, so they can see and I can see what changes they have made. There's plenty of other ways to do it besides Evernote. I just like it because I could see it on my mobile phone or my computer, and we could share it all around. But I think recording, I think you hit on a big thing there, Rebecca, is how you record those numbers is very important. Peace of mind, certainly, but also for performance.
So you mentioned tools. For a coach, what rigging tools are essential?
Okay. Right off the bat, you need a brain and you need a set up. And if you have those two, those are the two most important things. And you need to make sure that brain is open to making mistakes, failing, screwing up. At the same time, looking for screw-ups, looking for things that are broken, looking for things that might mean, Jesus, here's 2 hours of work I hadn't been planning on. So really an open mind. And I see so many people that go into a boat adjustment with a frame of mind. Okay, I'm going to make these 2 adjustments and I'm done. And they may miss something, like they may miss a broken track, or what happens quite often, especially more in the novice cruise, the port side track is 5 centimeters closer to the coxswain than the starboard side track, and the poor rower's calf is getting chewed up. So an open mind. The physical tools you need. You need a tape measure. I'd say this: holidays coming up, just ask for a good tape measure. Here in the States, we're screwy in the States. We use this U.S. customary system. There's 3 countries in the world that use it. I don't know why we use it. I'm a big fan of metric. But here in the States, when people ask me that question, I say, go to the hardware store, get a tape measure that has,
metric and imperial.
Sure. Have that on there. And that's at least can go 15 feet if you can. So you can measure your oars and you can measure anything else. It doesn't have to be that long, but you could. Tape measure, and then a pitch meter. Human eye is terrible at measuring angles. And we are very easily deceived by any sort of distortion in terms of angles. I have known a few people, coaches, who could look at something and say, that rigger is a half a degree off or a quarter degree off. And, darn it, I've lost more than one betting that person, and I throw the meter on there. And they were absolutely right. But that's the exception, not the rule. So many people, they really need a decent pitch meter. It doesn't have to be fancy. As a matter of fact, there's 1 or 2 that you can download and put them on your phone. So it's always in your pocket, which is a wonderful thing nowadays. But I would say a good tape measure, a good pitch meter, those are worth the investments. You don't have to go out and buy the top-end height stick, but you certainly can. And it's nice. I love tools, and I love having the feel of a good quality tool in my hand. But I tell you, I've measured more than one height using a 2x4, or if you really want to get a piece of something simple to get to as a straight edge, but also used as a height stick. The little runners, you can buy them at most hardware plumbing shop stores for shower stall doors that slide back and forth on. Those are very well milled, and they tend to hold their straightness, if you will. So those are 3 good things. And then the last thing is a decent set of wrenches. You're going to be making adjustments if you're going to be involved in rowing. And it's just nice to have wrenches that fit. Box end wrenches or open end wrenches. Take the adjustable wrenches and use them sparingly. If you have vice grips, that's a brand name here in the States, but the lock-on pliers. Give them to somebody. Send them to a rowing team you don't like as a present. Say, here, send them to your competitor. They just chew the heck out of everything. I mean, every once in a while you might need it, but I've had in my toolbox. I use it maybe once or twice a year at most, but just a decent set of wrenches. The holidays are coming up. Just put them on the top of your list.
Fabulous. Interestingly, I did want to give my sister a complete tool set for her Christmas present, and she was sorely disappointed at the time. I thought I'd chosen rather well. Right, we're going to move on to acknowledging our sponsor for today. Coxmate is sponsoring us at RowingChat, and they make amplifiers and speed measurement for rowing boats. The Coxmate SX is the top-of-the-range coxswain amplifier, and it uses GPS to display boat speed or a underboat micro impeller. Do you know how your boat slows down after you've steered a corner or after you've done a mid-race burst of power? With a Coxmate, you can discover the exact slowdown and make sure that your crew gets back up to speed afterwards. Trial a Coxmate for your crew by contacting Coxmate in Australia, RowPerfect in the UK and Ireland, Resolute in the US, or EuroRow in Holland.
And, to add to your shout out there, we are testing one now and had it in our hands and stuff, and I think there's a lot of good things there with the Coxmate. I haven't discovered them all, and that's what we're going to be attempting to do, but it looks really intriguing.
Well, thank you very much. I tell you, the thing that I want to test out is they have a metronome feature. I think it might be on the lower one model than the SX, the SRT, but I think it's really good for teaching beginners. So it just goes beep, beep. And so you can just go set the metronome to 18 strokes a minute or 22 or whatever you want. And it helps the athletes appreciate the timing when they're just beginning to learn.
Yeah. Well, I think if you change the beep to the word row, then you've satisfied anyone who's ever watched the sport of rowing that doesn't know anything about it. Because
exactly. Now, we have a question here from Catherine, who's asked what's the best approach for rigging for a masters club who have a wide-ranging both size and ability in their members?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one, Catherine. Here's what I would do. I would come up with a standard rigging adjustment scheme for, let's say you have 3/8. And we know what happens with masters rowings. You'll have a wide variety of experience and people, heights and athletic ability. So what I would do is I would go through and just find a very standard rigging configuration for everybody. Have all the boats at the same height, 8s. All the boats with the same spread, all the oars at the same length and such. And then give each rower that would need some variation, a way to adjust. So, for example, if you are, these are new folks, I would, when you have somebody who may be height challenged and they need a little bit of extra height, you give them a seat pad. Or, again, as we're talking about the person with a great lower legs length, you give them a seat pad, something easy. You give it to them. They name it, they call it, Bob. And they bring Bob to practice, and they're happy about Bob. And we have 1 or 2 gals in our team that have actually used some of this colored duct tape, and they pretty it up, and they put Hello Kitty duct tape on there or something like that. So that's one thing to do. If they're a little more advanced, you could show them actually how to adjust. And you have the adjustable riggers for height wise. You show them how to adjust the riggers in terms of height. Just remember, whenever you tell a rower that here you've empowered them to make adjustments. You're opening a Pandora's box, and it's like one person coming into the boathouse with a flu, and you just wait until everybody gets the flu. So you need to be a little bit careful with that. But if you have capable masters rowing, that's another way so they can make quick and easy adjustments. So they're taking some of that responsibility. I think that the seat pad is a quick and easy way. See, most masters rowing, when you're not at the very competitive level, or say it's the end of your season, the big racing, it's about getting out, taking the strokes in a comfortable manner. And height is one of the things that does make people uncomfortable when it's off for them. And another thing is the pitch, but that's something you can just set standard, and it should work. Sometimes a little roll of tape electrical tape that, you can adjust pitches. As a coach, you can just go around and put it on the oar lock, and you can adjust the pitch a little bit, makes a difference. But I would just set everything the same and realize there's going to be some variations. Height's usually going to be it, and then go from there. And then when the boats, in that scenario, people are moving around. Jane may be in the 8th seat in boat A one day, and she may be in the 4th seat in boat B the next day. So that kind of goes to that situation. But once you know where the rowers are going to be every day, then you can start adjusting the riggers to those people. So if Jane is in fact going to be the stroke of the A boat every single day, then you go ahead and make some adjustments specific to her. You get the height right for her, and those type of things. So the term that comes to mind for your question is vanilla. I just think it's standards like just a straight up cup of coffee, black or black with cream and sugar. It's boom, and then once everybody gets in their seat, then you can have Starbucks coffee. You can get all sorts of fancy little variations.
We found an interesting thing going to a regatta recently where men and women were sharing the same boats. We got a hold of some washers that you can clip on and off the pin so that we could lift them above and below the oar lock and adjust the height of the boat in between races without having to get a wrench out and take the rigger off.
Yeah, you could definitely do that. You run a risk of changing the outward pitch, but that it may be minimal, and if the rowers are more comfortable, then it certainly makes a difference. There's nothing worse. Yeah, go.
Why would the outward pitch change if you're just putting washers above or below the oar lock?
Sorry, I thought you were talking about right where you put the rigger right on the side.
No. These are 3/4 of a circle, and they're, instead of the black washers that go spaces above and below the oar lock. We have a cheeky word for them. I'll tell you some other time. But yeah, and they have 1 mil. I think they're 4 mil or 2 mil.
Yep. You can send that in the chat box. I won't share it with anybody. But and a lot of our boats now will come standard with those quick change, spacers. And what's nice about those is the rowers, when they get comfortable with it, they can start making. What's bad about those is the rowers will start making those changes and they start fixating. And then the 2 seat will say, Bob in the 6th seat has 3 on top and I only have 2 on top. And information. So.
Yeah, I put it in the chat box.
Yeah, I won't share it, I promise.
What are the most common rig mistakes you see when you're watching cruiser regattas?
Ooh. That's a good one. Okay, imagine you're looking at me right now, and I stick both my arms out at arm's length, and on my right hand is one end of this scale, and on that one is too much love, and on the left, my left arm is out and too little love. And those are 2 ends of a continuum. And that would mean, in terms of your specific question, the too much love is sometimes I see coaches that are rigging freaks, I call them. They can't help themselves. They have an addiction. And I've been in that situation. For example, we were in, I can't remember what country we were in. I was with the U.S. team, and the U.S. coach came up to me. The wind had just changed, and at that time we were rowing with wooden handles. And the U.S. coach came up to me and said, "Listen, real quick, races in 45. We're launching in 45 minutes. I need you to cut 1 inch off of each oar handle." Sure. Okay, got it. Pulled out my saw, took them off. In all seriousness. 25 minutes later, and that took maybe 3 minutes. Yeah. 25 minutes later, he came back and said, "Okay, listen, the wind just changed. I need you to glue it back on." And I'm looking at him, and I went, "You got it." And I stuck them all in my pocket, and that was it. And then he said, "Did you get them?" I said, "Yep, you're all right. You're ready to go." And there was no way in the world. The poor guy, the pressure he was under, and just the wind had changed, and it was just. I got that. Well, on the other hand, there's these people that just are rigging oblivious, and that may be extremely competent and hugely successful, but there's just all these things that terrible things that go on. Athletes that come up and just throw their oars on the ground very disrespectfully, or the way they're tied down or stuff. So there's these two ends of the continuum. I see that seldom, but it does happen. But usually I see it right in the middle. The most common rigging mistakes are the people get too stressed about the equipment and the rigging. And what I profess, anybody that's ever seen me talk or read any of my stuff knows this, is that if you look at the 5 things that make a boat go fast, and if your listeners don't pick up anything at all from this talk, I hope they catch this. The number one most important thing to make a boat go fast is the athletes, or athlete if you're sculling. The second most important thing is the training of that athlete. The third most important thing is the technique. The fourth most important thing is the equipment itself. And the fifth most important thing is the rigging. So equipment and rigging are way far down on the list. And yet I see too often coaches, and I say there's a lot of coaches, and sometimes I have to fight this myself. Actually, I have a lot of my, I've instructed several of my assistant coaches to physically harm me if I go near. They won't even let me touch the boats anymore. I've broken too many heel ties testing them before we go out for a race. They will physically say no. They'll lie to me. They'll say, hey, listen, you're needed over at the finish line tower. And just to get me the heck out of there. I love them for it too. But I see people get this is probably the most common mistake. People get too wigged out. There's too much fear that goes with it. And I think there needs to come a point where a coach just says, we're going to set it like this, and wind be damned, we're going to go right ahead and just row it. And this is what we're going to do, and not get too involved. I think the time you spend adjusting any riggers, you'll get 10 times more a reward from talking to your athletes, making sure they're cool, calm, and collected, or just you be cool, calm, and don't bug people. We're one of the few sports where the coach isn't involved. I mean, we can't coach during races. So it's kind of like, okay, let's stay cool, calm, and collected. So
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, longer than you wanted, but that's what I see.
Would you like to tell our listeners where they can get a hold of your writings on sports coaching and rigging?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. 2 places. One is Coaching Sports Today. That's where I'm writing about the intersection of life, coaching, and society, and the wild world of sports, I'll call it. So it's Coaching Sports Today. And then Max Rigging is where I've written, I think the site's been up for about 10 years, is where I write and have videos. A lot of videos up there anybody can watch that go to a lot of these specific questions. They're up on YouTube, but you can access those either through YouTube at my Max Rigging channel or from Max Rigging. So maxrigging.com and coachingsportstoday.com.
Fantastic. Here's a question from my husband. He asks, would you change your gearing set for a 2K race if the same crew was doing a 5K race?
Is that for your boat or for his boat?
It's for his boat.
Okay. So if I give him a bad answer, then it just affects him.
That's absolutely fine, yeah.
I would. I think the gearing, and when we talk about gearing, we're talking about as if you were to look at a bike, the gears on a bike or in a car. Are you in first gear, second gear, third gear? In a boat, in a rowing shell, it's the oar length, it's the spread, the inboard, those 3 main measurements. And I would have the gearing a little bit lighter for the fall races than I do I would in the spring races. So to give listeners a specific framework, we make 3 general adjustments here in our programs. Our head races start in September and they go through, say, early November. We'll have 1 set of gearing for that. Then when the folks come back from Christmas break, so we'll train from, let's say, end of January till the middle of March when we go on spring break. We have another set of gearing. So we've made the boats feel a little bit heavier during that time than they did in the fall. And then we have one last gearing change, and that's from the middle of March to whenever our races could be, the middle of May in that area. So 3 sets of changes. And in those 3 sets of changes, they're very slight. We only, so we may increase the oar length by 0.5 centimeter, and we may decrease the spread by 0.5 centimeter. So they're really slight changes. But those changes represent the improved conditioning that the athletes should have, and at the same time, the shortness of the race course, which usually transfers into improved or a higher rating. So they have a little bit higher rating. So they need to get their gearing up. And if you think about being on a bike, being in 10th gear compared to being in first gear is very low if you're going up a hill. It's hard to get, say, 120 RPMs when you're in that first gear. So you click it up so you can get a little bit higher and higher and higher. So there's that gearing change. But that's what we do, those 3 changes. And I would suggest having different gearings for head racing, the 5Ks, if you will, compared to the 2Ks.
Fantastic.
I hope he's happy with that.
I'll ask him later.
Yeah. Put it in the chat.
We have one last question from Philip, and then we're going to open up to listener questions. And Philip asks, do you agree that the constructivist-only method of coaching, or do you feel that the coach input is vital?
Yeah, I like Philip. I don't know Philip except for his question, but I like him because I like that question. And I would say both. The constructivist, as I understand it, is you learn by doing, which I think is great. I think that's how we, as humans, I think that's innate in how we learn is do things. However, at the same time, I think it's great to have a guide help you do those things better. And I look as a coach as a guide, and we're not there to do it for them. When I coach rowing, I'm not the one taking the strokes, which is good because I have a lousy stroke. But I guide them to help them figure out how to take a better stroke, and the guiding is comments and positive reinforcement and such. So I would go, Philip. I would go with both. I think they're both important, and I know that there are athletes that don't have guides or coaches that have been extremely successful. Those are exceptional people, and I know that there are athletes who've had coaches that completely overwhelm their athletes with comments and just almost don't give the athletes time to breathe, and they've still been successful. And those are exceptions. I think the rule is a good combination of both, of the athlete and the experiential knowledge. I think that's what helps. And I got to tell you, I think a lot of people go into sports to learn about themselves, not necessarily to get a medal. And with that said, one of the best ways to learn is by doing. Thanks, Philip. I hope that helps.
Great question. Now, one of our listeners, Grandson from Wilmington in North Carolina, has a question about hips. He says, hips are important. What do you recommend to prevent overtraining causing overstraining?
Okie dokie. Hips are important. I mean, it sounds silly. I was just having a conversation with our trainer about hip flexibility and how important that is. I think that question is better suited for a physiologist. I'll give you a quick 2-second viewpoint from my area of expertise of coaching rowing, and having certified trainers help me. I really like the overall conditioning model for the athletes of training the entire body. I think that there's many benefits to that. And I think if you focus on one area, you do risk overtraining, you do risk injury of that area. So, I'm kind of wimping out on you there, buddy. And, as a fellow North Carolinian, sorry. Sorry about that. But that's a good one. I'm going to think about that one.
I have a question from myself. Should I point my toes at the finish, or should I keep my heels down at the finish of the stroke?
Are you going for style or power?
Oh, always power me.
Then you got to get those heels down. Those heels, when you push, you want the whole foot pushing down. Now, this is my viewpoint, and there's probably disagreement out there, as with everything nowadays, but I believe that the whole foot pushing down, the heel to the toe, gives a really solid platform and makes the release itself more effective. And then the draw up of the feet towards you on the recovery. And you know what I would do, Rebecca, I'm going to suggest this, is get on the erg. You know where there's some ergs. I'm sure you can find one or two. And try both and see what happens with your power and see what happens with what you view as, or however you measure your effectiveness. And the erg isn't a perfect place to do it, but do it first on the erg and then do it on the water. Myself, I'm a real proponent of just full foot down, pressing off the footboard, and not. I know where you're coming from. Those toes up. I'm sorry, the toes pointed, so to speak. Style points, yeah. I don't think you get power points. I don't think so.
Fair dues. What's your rule of thumb for gauging whether your crew's correctly geared to race 2,000 meters?
Yeah, speed, test, numbers. We run numbers. Not all the time, not every moment, every stroke, but we run speeds on our crews, and we'll do it for a variety of length pieces, different ratings and such, and have speed charts. So that's how we tell whether we're rigged right, geared right for this specific time of year. And I got to tell you, in the fall, I don't want to be rowing 36, 38 strokes a minute. In the spring, I don't want to be rowing 28 strokes a minute. Now I'm talking about specific racing times. So the numbers help keep me based and help keep me directed to what might be best for the crew. And so again, you're going to, you've heard me in the last hour talk a lot about testing, but I think that's where you do testing and recording and testing. And, it's like you're running your own little business there, and, you're just keeping track of the finances, in this case, speed being the finance. And you've got to kind of lay it out and figure that out. So I would say you just have to test and figure out how you're going to record speed, and then be methodical about it. Not so much that, you're thinking about 3 o'clock in the morning, sleep it till at least 5 and then think about it. Yeah.
Any more questions from listeners? While I'm waiting for those, Mike, what actually do you record? You say you record your numbers. What do you write down?
Well, the speed numbers themselves are worthless without the rating. So we need to have the rating. And so we like to get the rating. If we run like a 2-minute or 3-minute piece, we get the average rating for that piece, which, realizing that there's variations, they may start out at a 38 and then come down to a lower rating. I get that, but we take the average. And then, so it'll be rating, and then it will be, we'll go with pace. You can either go with pace, speed per 500, let's say, or meters per second. I like meters per second.
So do I. I think it's far more accurate. There's less rounding errors. And that's why I like it. However, I've got so much data right now that's with speed per 500 and it translates, for me in my own mind, it translates so easily to the overall picture of a 2K, and it's kind of in our culture now, in our vocabulary here at our school, and I think, I won't say all across the states, but a lot in the states, that's become something that we're comfortable with. So we tend to use that more than the meters per second. But
I think meters per second is a more exact, precise. On the erg, we use watts, and I go with I think watts are like our meters per second on the water. I think watts are very specific compared to the pace. But
good. We have a question about training on a river, going upstream and downstream. How accurate could you measure the speed in pieces?
Yeah, there you go. Boy, throw current in there, throw wind in there, and boy, you just, you might as well.
Steering on a river. I guess that person isn't on a straight river either. They're in the UK.
Yeah. You might as well just bring a bottle of vodka to practice and just go out and have a party. I say that jokingly, but sometimes it's really hard to get the information you want. And I've come at it from a couple of different angles. My background is in oceanography, where I studied, my undergraduate. Those 4 wonderful years of college that took me 30 years to get through. Just kidding. You can look at it, being on the river, from a couple of different ways of always compromising. Well, I'm going to measure these into the headwind. I'm going to measure these into the tailwind. I'm going to average. That's a compromise. Or you're going to say, I'm only going to row at slack tide, and those are the numbers I'm going to use. Well, of course, then there's a compromise. We're tidal here, so the river in question here may be just a straight flow river. When I was up in Albany, New York, we had straight flow, more so than tidal. I mean, there were tides there, but here, where I am right now, we have tidal, so we get a significant current out, but then we'll also get a significant current in. So we have to take all those into play. And one of the things that we try to do, and I don't know if the reader or the listener, could do that, is find a secluded area for testing. And it may only be 20 or 30 strokes long, but there's a lot of validity you can get from that short area. If it's protected from the current, it could be really helpful. So it's a compromise. It's not perfect. The numbers you get won't be perfect, but it's better to get some numbers than no numbers. But I would be careful that you do realize it is a compromise, and nothing will be absolute. So the numbers you get, just have them help inform a coaching decision rather than dictate a coaching decision. So if you're considering reducing the spread to make it feel a little heavier, just take any spread numbers that you get on a river or a place with constant wind as something that will help you make a decision but won't dictate the decision. So it's a lot of compromise, and that's part of our sport. I mean, heck, it's a water sport. It's an outdoor sport. You get all sorts of things. I've been hit by pelicans. I've had oars bit by alligators. You get a wake. You've been shot at. It's crazy wacky, and you're dealing with human beings. So it's never perfect. And unfortunately, on rivers and with wind, makes it a little bit more challenging.
Thank you, Mike. I'm looking forward to the pelican moment myself.
Yeah. It'll come.
Now, Mike is very generously giving away a copy of his Nuts and Bolts Guide to Rigging book, and this is going to be made available to everyone who's on the Row Perfect newsletter list at the end of this month, and we'll do a prize draw, which fortunately our email service provider has a super little button you click and it picks a random subscriber, and we'll do that at the end of the month. But in the meantime, Mike is also offering a free 30-minute consultation with anyone who is listening here today on the chat, by email or by Skype, if they would like to ask him any personal questions. And what we'll do is we will email you after we close off with his contact details so that you can get in touch directly. Mike, thank you. That's a very, very generous offer.
Heck yeah! I mean, this has been a great sport for me, and if I can give back, it would be my honor. So, be happy to help. Don't know if I can, but we'll give it the old the rowing try.
I hazard a guess that maybe is going to be one of your answers.
Yep.
Thank you, Mike, for your time, for your energies, for your enthusiasm for rigging. Without you, we would all of us be less rich in our knowledge. And I have hugely enjoyed the time we spent together.
It was totally my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And Thanks to all our listeners, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.